everybody. This is Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space, and today I have a guest on the channel. This is Alana.
Hi.
Alana Estelle has a wonderful channel, which if you guys have not checked it out yet, you absolutely should. Alana, do you want to describe your channel for everybody?
Sure. I have a booktube and I pretty much do single book reviews in my channel, old school YouTube style. When people used to just sit down in front of a camera and talk about one thing. So I like to just do deep dives into the books that I read and really focus on themes and how I break down and process what I'm reading. With the occasional book haul, because I can't say no to buying a book.
You find really beautiful books. Like you know how to haul.
I do a lot of research when it comes to picking a book. Like I have to look across all planes and I'm analyzing which editions and then I have a method to the madness.
Maybe later too, we can talk more about how you review and stuff because
Okay.
you have very in-depth and thorough reviews, and I love them. They're really wonderful.
Thank you.
So today we're going to be talking about the book Life in Motion by Misty Copeland, and this is an autobiography. Wait, is it an autobiography?
Yeah, I would call it an autobiography or a memoir.
By the first African American dancer to land the role of principal in ABT. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Alana knows a lot about this dancer. So I actually heard about the book from her Instagram. Alana reviews books on Instagram as well.
Mm-hmm.
Really beautiful pictures and again, really great in-depth reviews. So check her out there if you're on Instagram. And it's doubly exciting to talk with Alana about this because she is also a ballerina.
An amateur ballerina.
Yes.
And an amateur tap dancer. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Maybe we should start with when you started dancing and how you kind of fell in love with dancing.
Yeah, so I've always been fascinated by ballet since before I was even in school. And I'd always wanted to be a ballerina. I don't know where that came from. Actually, I don't know where that came from. And then granted, within the past few years, I learned that my grandmother, my dad's mother, always wanted to be a ballerina. So one could argue that genes are really powerful things, and even sometimes our desires may be genetic. I don't know. Existential crisis there, I don't know, or existential question maybe, but I've always been fascinated by ballet. And I remember when I was 4 years old, I told my mom I wanted to be a ballerina. And I have very practical parents.
Mm-hmm.
She showed me a photo of a professional dancer's foot. It was taped up. And um, it looked like she was on point, but she was not in a point shoe. But the foot looks like if you were to look at it, right, with her balancing on her with the big toe being balanced on the ground, she was taped up and bloody and blistered. And I was like, I don't really want my feet to look like that. And so that thought kind of went away. But I've always been fascinated by ballet. The first ballet that I saw performed was the Nutcracker. My dad took me when I was in high school. I've seen the Nutcracker more times than I can count at this point. So I'd watched professional ballets. I've seen ABT a couple times, but once you get to a certain age, you think, oh, it's too late for me to pick up dance, especially ballet. And then the end of 2018, it was actually in November of 2018, when I used to work for Parks and Rec, I learned that there are adult beginner ballet classes. And I was 20. How old am I? I think I was 27 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait, you don't have to have any experience, whatever. And they're like, yeah, they're specifically designed for adults who want to start. So I was like, sign me up.
Yeah.
I was like, if I try it and I hate it, at least I can say I got that completely out of my system, because there was just something that I could not shake about wanting to learn ballet. Maybe there was even maybe a little bit of regret there. Like, man, what if I missed out on something that I would have liked? So I decided to take classes. I started in January of 2019, and I've been going now for 3.5 years. So that's how that happened. I just could not shake this desire to dance. And also I did end up playing, I have always been creative though. So I ended up playing the clarinet for a long time. So that kind of, I think part of that desire, that creativity to create in a musical way got pushed into music. I was always very naturally inclined. I picked up an instrument very quickly. I played the clarinet at one point. When I was 18, I was one of the top clarinetists in my district for an 18-year-old and within my age group. But when you get older, there's always, and you work and you go to school, music got, I couldn't be, I was the double major. I stopped playing the clarinet with the band after high school. And I missed interacting with music. And so ballet was also a way for me to interact with music again, but in a different medium, because dance is not easy.
Yeah.
That was a long-winded answer, but I think that's kind of my thought process of why I decided to do it.
Wow. Yeah, it seems like very physically taxing.
It is. It's physically the hardest thing I've tried to make my body do. Ballet in particular. Tap is different. Ballet is probably the hardest thing physically. Yeah, I've gone through physical therapy for an injury before. I've lifted weights and all that other stuff. Ballet is the hardest.
Oh man, you must be in great shape though.
I am in pretty good shape. I'm not going to lie. Like ballet, like, it's slower than, let's say, if I were to just go and bench press at the gym, right? Which I'm not a fan unless I had a physical therapist there with me. The changes in my body have been subtle. And over time, I think I would say by last year, I realized, oh, well, my body has changed. But
have you been injured?
Yeah. I've had one minor injury. I had a foot sprain at the end of 2020.
Okay.
That took a proper 3 months to fully heal. After a month, I was able to tape my toes up and keep going. But
yeah. So when did you go on point? You've gone on point, right?
I have been on point in the sense that my instructor has put me in a point shoe to see what I need to work on, but I'm not dancing on point. For a person who's only been dancing for 3.5 years, I was able to get on point at the bar after only a year. My instructor was surprised, but I just have really strong feet. But being on point will highlight any issues that you need to work on. So I'm getting closer to be able to dance on point at the bar. Start with that. But there is something that's called a Demi point shoe. So you have the soft shoe. And then you have not everybody uses the Demi point shoe. It's more popular in more European styles of ballet teaching. Not so much, it's not so popular in the United States, but it's exactly like a point shoe without this hard shank, the hard sole or whatever. So the box of it is quite rough. It has given me blisters. It's but you can't go on point on it. You shouldn't go on point. You can't. You would really hurt yourself. But that in and of itself was really difficult to get used to, because you really have to force your feet to articulate. The purpose of it is to start to build up those muscles in the foot that you have to use when you're on point. It also does highlight things that you also need to work on, because you have to use more strength to articulate those foot movements because you have more resistance. A lot of adult dancers, when they start as adults, don't have any desire to go on point. I'm actually the only one in my class who wants to go on point.
Wow.
Or who will go on point. Like my teacher knows that's what I want to do, and she knows that's always in the back of her mind. So she knows that she's, as of the end of last year, she was like, I think you're about a year away.
Wow. Okay.
But I'm not gonna change. But that's what she told me. She's like, I'll give you about another year. But a lot of people don't want to do it because it will change your feet. It's painful.
Yeah. I can imagine. I've seen your shoes.
It's a different feeling.
Yeah.
It is a weird sensation. Nothing about it is normal.
So part of what made Misty so special, it sounds like, in her biography, was that she did get on point very quickly, but also just in general, she seemed especially equipped for the dancing life. Just like naturally, she could watch a dance and imitate it very quickly and stuff like that.
Right. She's just an anomaly. And I know, like, in the book, they constantly called her a protege. I mean, to get on point in 8 weeks after starting ballet at 13 is, nobody does that. No one, except Misty Copeland. She's just one of those people, I think, that was born to do it. Some people are born to do something, and that's what and if you were to see her in person, she's really built like a gymnast. She's shorter. She's a lot more muscular than that long, leaner She's lean, but her muscles, her muscle has developed a little bit. That's why she jumps really high, because she's just short and compact like a gymnast. In the book, she talked about, when she finally hit puberty and her body started changing, how that was an issue in the dance world because she didn't have that typical look of a dancer or a ballerina per se. But what she's just springy. She could just jumps. The woman has hops.
Yeah. It sounds like, that made her unique, and it caused ABT to have to kind of stretch their views on dance and what that should look like. What you
exactly. What those principles should look like.
Which was a good thing. It sounds
Now there's another dancer who is, I don't know if she's their first Black principal dancer at the San Francisco Ballet, but she's probably one of them. Okay. She's half Swedish, I believe she's half Swedish or Swiss and half Jamaican. So she was a principal at a different company, I think in Austria. And then so in 2020, she went to San Francisco Ballet. And so she's a principal there. But if it wasn't for people like Misty Copeland, I don't know if people would have considered her as much as, they would have in the past. Yeah. And they know I believe those two women know each other.
Just in any industry, it's exciting for diversity to be present, because it really changes things in a good way.
And it makes you think, like, if somebody has the talent to do it, then they should be given the spot.
Yeah, totally. And like we were talking about, she was like just made to do this. Like, incredible. So it would have been their loss if they had.
Hands down.
How did you hear of Misty Copeland and her biography?
So I actually learned about Misty Copeland really from my father. My father is also a big ballet head. He loves ballet. And so that's why we would go. If I go to the ballet, he's my ballet going buddy. And so he was the one who actually introduced me to Misty Copeland. And this was several years ago. We were watching I think it was a Netflix documentary at one point that was highlighting Misty Copeland. A lot of what she talked about in the book is in that documentary, but the book is in more detail. And so that was my introduction to Misty Copeland. And so I actually didn't know this book was a thing, but for my birthday last year, one of my best friends gifted me the book. And I was like, oh, this is great. I'll read this. She was like, did you see the front page? It's like, what do you mean? She was like, it's signed. So this one, so
wow.
I don't know how she tracked that down. But this
that is awesome.
Yeah, so she knew I was a Misty Copeland fan.
So did you know about her from a pretty young age?
I didn't know about her until maybe my early 20s.
Your friend knows you well, obviously. So you're pretty picky about handing out 5-star ratings, but you gave this one 5 stars. So what about this autobiography is so special for you?
It's funny. I'm not usually an emotional reader. And this was, for me to give a book a 5 star, I guess I should probably back up and say why. When I typically give a 5 star, what's the ingredients to that 5 star? It has to be beautifully, I like really good language. Like a really good writer can make anything palatable. So usually the writing has to be really, really good. I don't have to have a heavy plot in my books, but I'm really into really good character development. And sometimes a 5-star read just has that je ne sais quoi, like it just has that something. And I will admit, I don't think that this book is the most beautifully written book, as in the style of it or the writing quality is the best. I know she had help, but there is just something emotional about the book that struck a chord with me. It's very simply written, but I think that in the way that this story or her memoir is told, simple was best. Again, it wasn't the best writing style that I've come across. But it wasn't overdone. It didn't feel like she was trying too hard, or whoever was helping her write was trying too hard. I think that Misty Copeland's voice was still present in the book. Like you can tell, that she's definitely telling her story. But there was just, I think that the way that she talked about dance and what ballet means to her and what performing means to her, I think that's what pushed this book over as a 5-star read for me. There was something I think that I connected with how I personally have always felt about ballet, and also having played an instrument and interacting with music, you know, there was just something that I was just picking up on, and I was like, yeah, I totally get it. I'm not a professional by any means. Okay. Sometimes when I dance, I still feel like a fish out of dry land. Okay. Like sometimes I'm struggling. A lot of times I'm struggling. But I don't know. She was very honest, and that connected. That was a rambling answer. Sorry.
No, that's great. I think sometimes when you read something by an artist in your field or the fields that interest you most, sometimes it's just really extra special. I like what you said too about how her voice came through. It was like simple, but it really worked for her narrative, because something else that really stood out to me was how many people she mentioned.
Yes. Yes.
She seemed like very gracious and
yeah, she comes across very humble.
Yeah.
Humbly. And she gives credit where credit is due. She doesn't make excuses for herself. She doesn't make excuses for her industry, but she also doesn't bash the industry in a way. You know what I mean? Like, she's very honest about it, but she's very balanced. And I think it would be easy for this book to be political.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
She calls a spade when it needs to be called a spade.
Right.
And that's it. She doesn't take it any farther.
Yes. I loved that too. She would point out things like when her and a Black friend that was also a dancer were told, her friend was told to grow his hair long, and they just were cracking up about that.
Right.
Because he's like, it would not grow long, you know?
It grows out. But they didn't take it beyond what it needed to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They didn't. I'm pretty sure ABT has read her memoir. How could they not?
Yeah.
Because if anybody comes up with a memoir from your company, it's either going to give the company good press or bad press. I think she was balanced in a way that ABT could look at this and say, I'll allow it.
Yes. Yeah. I think
because
so.
I mean, she's talking about her employer. Yeah, and she nailed it. She had the, what do we call it at work? She had the diplomacy to know how to handle it.
I would definitely call this very diplomatic.
Yeah.
And she talked about a lot of difficult things, like her upbringing with her mom. And I feel like she was also very diplomatic about her mom, because she loves mom. And I think they have a good relationship, you know, now. But it was tough to describe her growth in a way that was real, but also not blaming overly much.
Right. And she made the effort to sympathize with her mother.
Yeah.
Where she could have done the opposite.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of character. Like I just admire the way that she's able to talk about people in her family in a way that isn't disparaging towards them. Like, you can tell that she has a respect for the people in her life, regardless of if she always agreed with what they did or not, or how they were thinking at that particular phase in their life. So in 2000 and I don't know, I think just to shine a kind of a light on how I kind of perceive Misty Copeland as, but it's hard. I mean, she's a celebrity. I mean, she's one of the biggest names in ballet. But so in 2020, before COVID shut everything down, I went to go, the ABT was performing in DC. So my dad and I went to go see Misty Copeland perform in Swan Lake. She was injured in it. And when we got there, we had a little bill in our handout that said a different dancer will be filling in for her. Actually, it's the same injury that kind of flares up that she talked about in the book. And so people were bummed. Of course, they're going to see Misty Copeland.
Right.
But the person who performed for her in her place was so good. She was not a principal at the time. That you forgot that you're supposed to be watching Misty Copeland. And Misty Copeland, then after her performance, the dancer's name is Skylar Brandt, who has thus become my favorite dancer because of that performance. No, sorry, it was in Swan Lake. She was supposed to be performing Gazelle. Misty said, if I didn't sit out, you wouldn't have known this talent existed. That takes a lot of grace to say, because she knew that people were there for her, but she knew, like, there's other talent besides me. So
gracious. Your Instagram aesthetic is just really, really gorgeous. So
thank you.
And consistent too.
Yeah.
Like, so I love the shot that you took with your book, the signed book, and your ballet shoes. And I would just love to hear more about your process for creating Instagram posts.
For me, there is a science behind it. I think that for me, you know, I'm creative. And I like to challenge myself in a way. So if you go back through my feed, you can kind of see how I was playing with different styles when I first started my Instagram. well, when I first started geared towards books, a lot of the pictures were a lot more colorful or whatever. But then I was like, I'm kind of getting bored with that. I want to try something new. So the current look that I have now, it's very simple. Everything's the same tone. It's all in the same background, just because that's what I wanted. I themed it that this year. That's what I wanted the tone to be. It took some trial and error to figure out over time, how do I want to place the books? How do I take better pictures? A lot of it's just practice.
Mm-hmm.
But, I just kind of had this idea going in for 2022. I wanted the aesthetic, if you will, the most overused word by millennials these days, to be really simple and really clean and just focus on the cover of the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. That's what will make each picture unique, is the cover of the book.
And that way it is always nice. I mean, let's be frank. I mean, it's always nice when you look at a page, and I wanted my page in particular somebody to look at it and was like, oh, there's a consistent tone here. Everything kind of flows. It all looks like, you know what I mean? There's those people. I follow people who have like really stunning photos. I'm like, I don't have that kind of time, but right. But I just like that consistency.
Yeah. Consistency is really key, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I like the challenge. It's challenging to kind of play around with how I want the tone. Like, I'm already coming up with what I think, how I want my images to look for next year.
Do you change it yearly?
That's what, that's what I'm going to start doing. I noticed that what year is it? Oh, good. I'm getting old. My memory is going. In 2020, my photos were a lot more colorful, brighter. And then I kind of started to 2021 looked a little like it's trying to tone that down a little bit. And then this year I was like, I want this year to have a cooler tone to it. Mm-hmm. Even a more simplistic tone. I already know that next year I want it a little warmer, a little cozier. I'm just trying to figure out how I want to do that. So for me, as a person who likes to play with color and texture and things like that, it's a challenge for me to try to get something that I'm happy with and then keep improving it.
Yeah.
I'm like that. I think that's probably just how I'm wired.
Yeah. And you think that's fun. So yes.
Yeah, it's a challenge for me. Exactly. Some people are like, that's a lot of time. Why would you want to do that? But for me, it's fun.
Yeah. It's like a very French attitude.
Is it? Thank you, Christy. Like, I admire the French. Like, I admire French chic stuff. Like, I model the way that I dress after the French.
Yes.
That French simplicity, that easy, classic simplicity of the French. Like, that is, like, Audrey Hepburn is my fashion icon.
Yes.
So I like that you picked up.
Yeah, they look like so simple, but it took a lot of work to get them there,
Right. And it's just timeless, classic,
yeah,
well put together, but not over the top. Like, you're wearing the clothes aren't wearing you.
So your book reviews are very in depth. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us about kind of, you like to annotate books, which you show on Instagram, which I love. That's great. Yes, exactly.
A copy of Monte Cristo.
That is, wow. Okay. I was reading it physically for a while, but I didn't have very many annotations. So
yeah, this is the first half of the book.
That's great. So what does your process look like for writing a review?
So it does start, for me, the reviewing process starts as I'm reading it, and that starts with my annotations. So when I get into a book, I notice that there's a trend. It doesn't take me too long to get into the book to realize where my review is going to go. Because as I'm highlighting, I'm making notes about the themes that I'm seeing or the trends that I'm seeing in the work. And then so sometimes I'm writing myself questions like, oh, is this what this person's doing? And so I'm kind of percolating as I'm reading the book. And then after I'm finished reading the book, I actually let the book marinate for a little bit. I don't immediately write my review, or I don't immediately outline my review, because I'm sometimes still piecing something together. So then when it's time for me, when I'm like, okay, it's time for me to review this book, I'll go back, I'll go through all of my annotations, and I'll start listing out all of my themes and all of the page numbers that correlate with those themes. And so then I outline the book. So I have a journal or a notebook where I have the outline of the overview. I, in a few sentences, summarize the book. And then I start to write down the quotes that I want to use to back up certain themes. And then that's how it works for me.
Well, thank you so much, Elena, for coming and talking with me
Thanks for having me.
and recommending this book.
Yes, go read it. Go read it. Even
Yeah.
if you're not a ballet head. It's just
worth
such a good book. Oh my goodness. I cried a little bit, not gonna lie. Not tear. I choked up a little bit during this book. And I am not a crier. Like I say I have the emotional range of a doorknob.
it.
I just don't process through my feelings. But this book, there's just something about it that struck a chord. So good.
Yeah, I thought it was very special as well. I just honestly listened to it and I feel like I could go
Me
back
too.
and listen to it again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It felt like a friend was talking to you.
Yeah. Telling me her very interesting life story.
Yeah.
So highly recommended, guys. And
Yes.
thank you for watching this video. Please remember to go check out Elena's channel and or Instagram. And we'll see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.